Vengeance.
Hey, welcome back to Screen Crush. I'm Ryan Airy. One of my favorite parts about The Batman is how it really dug deep into Batman's mind and showed all these ways that he and the Riddler were alike, even mirror images of each other. Batman movies have always touched on the mental state of Bruce Wayne and his rogues gallery, but this new Batman movie delves so deep into the psychology of the character that we actually interviewed a real psychologist, Dr. Travis Langley, author of this great book, Batman and Psychology. This is a terrific interview conducted by Jenna Bush. I hope you enjoy it.
So, the Riddler is inspired by Batman, and that sort of changes Bruce's entire arc. And I'd love to know what you think Bruce has been doing wrong, if he's been doing anything wrong that inspired the Riddler.
Well, he has shown the dramatic examples that can draw attention. He has shown the dramatic examples that can affect change. And it can be the flamboyance that he's bringing into it is found. I've interviewed retired FBI profilers and others who have spent a lot of time pursuing criminals. And because a lot of people say, oh, Batman needs Joker as much as Joker needs Batman, because the Riddler is Batman's closest to Joker in this movie. But the ones who really investigate these criminals say it's like, no, they want the criminal to be stopped. The investigator does not fantasize or romanticize the relationship. They want that person to be stopped, and they also know there's going to be another one around the corner. However, there are many cases in which the criminal wants to be important to the pursuer. They want to think there's more of a connection than there really is. And if they get caught, this can often be used to get them talking and spilling information, as the Riddler does to some degree here, although he's awfully controlled in what he's been telling all along the way. There is a point at which the Riddler is talking to Batman, and the Riddler is really unhappy with how this conversation goes. It is because Batman is not playing out the fantasy. He's not playing the fantasy the way the Riddler had it in his head. This will happen with some real-life serial criminals. This happened with stalkers. Where they have these fantasies in their head and they get upset, distraught, angry because it didn't go the way they fantasized. And so what he's doing is very true to certain type of individuals, human nature there.
And Bruce seeing the mayor's son, finding his father's body, seeing him at the memorial, it obviously reminds him of himself. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and what that does to Bruce.
The first time we see this kid in the movie, we as the audience are wondering, is this Bruce Wayne as a child? Are those his parents that we're glimpsing? We're supposed to think that. And then Bruce, in the course of the movie, sees him 3 times. Batman sees him right after the death. Bruce sees him and saves him at the memorial. And then Batman reaches out his hand, and this child is the first one to take Batman's hand and let him lead them all to rescue, lead them to safety. So this child blatantly is a stand-in for Batman's younger self, where Batman has to save his own younger self. He's reminded of what he went through, and that his greater mission is not to punch those slugs. It is to help those who've gone through things like what he went through and help others not go through the horrible things. So usually we see Batman where he's already serving the dual mission of stopping the criminals and helping the victims. Here's one where he had not reached that point yet. And so this child, who represents the inner 8-year-old that Batman still is, helps him focus on that. And this at the end, since we're doing spoilers, this at the end, when this is the first time we've seen Batman doing basic first responder rescue jobs. He's really getting dirty, and people are learning. It's like this. It's not just that he learns that he needs to inspire hope. The people who are there are learning to be inspired by him, to feel hope at the sight of this man.
I wanted to ask you about Alfred, because we've seen a lot of different versions of him. And in this one, I believe he's the bodyguard for Bruce's parents. And he has sort of been a father figure since the parents died, but it doesn't seem to have landed with Bruce. Can you talk a little bit about why that is?
Yeah, here we see some things that we saw elements of on the TV show Gotham. which they would play out with, and at times Bruce not recognizing the importance of this man in his life. Here we're starting with a Bruce who is missing the Bruce component of himself. He has been so focused on his mission that he is not recognizing some very important aspects of his own nature. In the film, when he's telling Alfred how important Alfred is to him, it's also that he's realizing it himself. He's been so focused on these other things, he had not even when he's treating Alfred as when he's outright saying, "You're not my father," and Alfred's well aware of that. Bruce has been trying to relate to him as this employee, this employee who's helping him serve his insane mission, and Bruce is recognizing that this is the man who has raised me. This is the most important person in my life, because he hasn't let himself develop other relationships, and that makes that right there, that contact, that connection, is probably the most important thing for making him realize he's got to do more. That, and finding out what they did with his family's renewal project over the years, because it was left unattended.
And I know that it's very hard to diagnose people that you're not actually treating, but I am curious what your thoughts are on what is going on with the Riddler.
I have my thoughts, and then I'm a little weary on going too far into some of the aspects. Normally, the Riddler is shown as being very narcissistic, incredibly egotistical, and there is this self-absorption aspect to him. Absolutely, that he had apparently some well-deserved anger at one point, but plenty of people go through things that make angry, that they can be righteously indignant about, that don't follow those paths. He could have taken the same information he had without committing a series of killings to bring it out. It's like, why not just email all that information to every newspaper in the nation? We already know he knows how to email stuff to the news. We saw that very clearly with the thumb drive. So he has all this information that he wanted the dramatic way. He wanted the attention. He wanted to be the one. He wanted a story. He had this playing out this fantasy again. It's which you'll see with certain types of serial killers, and Zodiac is an obvious comparison. The criminals who send those messages to taunt authorities tend to be very, very full of themselves, definitely with some narcissistic qualities. There's more to it than that, though. The most egotistical people in the world don't become serial killers necessarily. Tony Stark is pretty egotistical, but he also has plenty of things. Of course, he has good reason for his ego. He does have commensurate achievements as the diagnostic criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. It says that the person has this inflated sense of their own importance without commensurate achievements, but Tony Stark has them. Here is the Riddler trying to have the achievements that would make him feel like, yes, I can do the things that are as big as I have felt like I am. And then we might just start trying to diagnose, if there were an incel disorder, he seems to fit in there, and his followers sure do.
One of the things I wanted to ask you next was actually about the Riddler's followers, and it's not even just the people who follow him in this secret chat room, which is maybe on the dark web, but it's also people that show up with signs that say "No more lies." I'd love to hear your thoughts on that sort of phenomenon that we're seeing lately in general, with people following people who may not be doing the right thing.
They get to feel part of something different. They get to feel part of something special. They're part of, the people behind the scenes. They know truth that those folks out there don't know, and we want them to see the truth. There is a strange comfort in believing conspiracy theories. And the people who will connect through the shared belief in a conspiracy theory, and of course, Riddler ends up providing a whole lot of evidence that conspiracies have been going on. But why did they start off believing this? Why were they ready to believe it even before they knew? The world is such a strange, chaotic, and dangerous place. We want to believe there's something more orderly and more predictable than necessarily really is. It's, as a previous Joker says, even if it's a horrible plan, people will feel better if they think that there is a plan. So likewise with the belief in conspiracies, but believing that they exist, believing that and they're the people who want to take down the folks at the top. They want to feel empowered. When Jason Todd got killed in the comics, for those who don't know, there was a phone vote to kill off Jason Todd, and more people voted for him to live. However, some people who are voting to kill him were more enthusiastic about it, especially one guy who keeps it going to just auto dial and dial. He's paying like 50 cents a call, but he gets to say, I killed Jason Todd. All those people, every single one of those people who voted, get to go that they were part of killing Jason Todd. These people, by joining this thing with Riddler, if he succeeds on bringing anybody down, they get to have this sense of power and place and meaning in the world by feeling as if they were part of bringing so-and-so down, even if they weren't one of the dozen that showed up to actually do the shooting.
It's true. And I'd love to talk a little bit about Catwoman. She grew up with her mother in a club, leaving her there in a club, with a father who didn't acknowledge her, and now she works in the same place. And I just love your thoughts on how she got to where she is now.
Well, as Catwoman is written in the comics, grew up poor, the daughter of Maria and usually Brian Kyle. Although there was a spell in comics when she thought Carmen Falcone was her father, or that he could be her father. And so they are directly pulling that from it, and it works so well in this story. And this is a real human thing. And it does also say something very much about the place in life that she came from. Her winding up working there, I think that has totally been strategy for getting close to Falcone, to figure out how to get a score, to get something from him. She has interesting parallels to Bruce Wayne. The Riddler has his own parallels to Bruce Wayne in this movie. Her, Riddler, it's like they're orphans. They grow up, with it's like Bruce with these parents missing. However, two of them grow up poor and don't have the butler there to help raise them right. They have their own sets of different circumstances that they go through. The system fails them. Although in Selina's case, if she's at all true to comics, it's she also decided she wasn't going to stick with the system. And oddly enough, this is the Selina, I think, the live-action depiction of Selina that is closest to her comic book version.
And I'd love for you to talk a little bit. Everyone knows about PTSD, but not a lot of people know about post-traumatic growth. And I'd love to know if you think, where you think Bruce falls between those two things.
Okay, the PTSD, people know what it is. There's a lot of wrong ideas about it. It is a range of symptoms. You can go through trauma and have it change you drastically and it still not be that specific condition. It has particular kinds of symptoms, some of which he absolutely has, such as reliving the experience more than other people. Oh, man, is that Batman. It's even though this is one film where we don't see a replay of the Wayne's murder, he lives with that all the time. Batman relives it more than other people. That is an aspect of PTSD. There's certain symptoms he usually doesn't fit, though. Avoidance. He does not show an avoidance symptom. He does not avoid dark alleys. He does not avoid criminals. He seeks them out. In terms of his priorities in life, fighting crime, it's like, yes, we can see where he's not doing it perfectly, but he's better at that than any of us. So there are things where he is functioning well. There just are other areas where he's not functioning well. This is the Bruce where he's in the worst shape of any Batman we've seen in any film so far. Because there are things where he's not functioning well. He's not even realizing where he needs to do something about it when Alfred is trying to get him to see it could all fall apart. Even the logic of like, well, how are you going to pay for your wonderful toys, if you let this all fall apart? So he's suffering more PTSD symptoms than we've seen before. There's a moment in Batman Begins when Bruce was going to kill Joe Chill, before he's headed off into the world. He didn't care if he lived or died. He didn't care what happened in the mansion. It's like that moment resonates with some of the Bruce that we're seeing here, but he went a different path in the Nolan trilogy. Here we get this. We do get this Bruce who's very much influenced by some of the destructive aspects of PTSD. Whether he fits a full, there's still a couple things where it's like he's functioning pretty well at most things that he does. He just needs to expand it and grow. He needs to grow. Now, post-traumatic growth, somebody who's gone through the trauma, they show certain aspects of PTSD, especially one, the reliving of it. They don't let it go. They hang on to it. In fact, they feel that getting over it would be selfish. Candace Lightner, whose daughter got killed by a drunk driver, and she was so appalled by the light sentence that he got, she made her version of the Batman vow and waged war on drunk driving, founded what was originally called Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. Elie Wiesel, whose family got killed in the Holocaust, and then he educated the world about it. But Theodore Roosevelt was Nolan's model, for Batman. Somebody who'd grown up in a wealthy family, but with parents who taught him to look out for others. That he had the tragedy of losing his wife and his mother to different illnesses in the same house on the same day. He drew a big X in his diary, said the life has gone out of my life. Weeks later, he left his infant daughter with his sister, headed off into the Dakota Badlands, apparently planning to die. And then later on, he returned, somehow reinvigorated. He became a police commissioner in New York, riding around on his bicycle looking out for the underprivileged. He led the Rough Riders, like Rough Riders, his hero name, and he became president of some country too. But somehow these people, they took their pain and decided, I'm going to make meaning out of this. I'm not going to let this have happened for no reason. I'm going to find something meaningful to do with my pain and do something better in this world. They grow as people. They find purpose. And Bruce Wayne, he finds his purpose of waging war on crime. He still needs to grow. He's not as far along in the growth. We look at him and we see it always like, man, you are incomplete as a person. You need to grow more. Because with somebody like that, though, we're judging them compared to what they were like as a child. You change from when you're a child anyway. The world is scary and chaotic. Kids tend to deal with trauma better than most of us because the whole world is scary and chaotic and changing when they're kids. But he's on a path to grow. He absolutely shows by the end of the movie that he knows he needs to broaden what he's doing. He needs to expand. He fits some of these aspects of post-traumatic growth. What has surprised me is the number of people who told me that they had not heard of post-traumatic growth before they read my book, Batman and Psychology.
I have to once again recommend Travis's book. It is fantastic. So if you have any questions for us or for Travis, please let us know in the comments below, or you can @ me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.